page that you found the board.
Oh,
I'll look at it later, but
Yeah.
I'll make a copy and return this booklet to you.
you just get it, you don't have to copy the whole thing, just copy it.
Yeah, that sheet on board.
Do you want to say trees too?
Yes, I do. I want to take all of it because it pertains, but again, I'll copy and return that one.
Otherwise, we can just leave it all in this folder.
Well, I'm going to just keep the separate ones. Why don't I do that and then get this? These will be yours to go home with because I don't want to be responsible for that very priceless map, really. And I will copy and return.
And this, I've got another one.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, just put it on here if you want to.
Trees article. I knew y'all would have a lot, but this is.
Yeah, this is the one that I want back, because that's the only one I know there's around, this copy.
Yes, I will.
And that one's been around for so long.
Okay, well, if you want me to hang on to the folder, okay, to keep the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, because I've got another copy of that one at home.
And then this, I do want, I know I will return, read and return. Same for else.
Because when Steve was up at Creek, they were
Yes.
supposed to do the history of their parish. And I think that's when we found this one down.
Oh, that was perfect. Okay, let me slip this all back in there.
And that one is just out of the paper.
Yes, I recognize. Okay, this is perfectly wonderful, all of it. Okay, then I can sort this out after y'all are gone and I can figure out, I don't want to damage anything here. This is kind of big. Okay, we're good. Cool.
I'll let you have
All right, thank you. Thank you, thank you. And then I just want to show you, but I will, you're welcome to borrow it.
Oh my goodness.
This book is absolutely fantastic on the research that was done about the Ford plant by the author Brian McMahon. We'll talk about this in a little bit if you want to. It's a wonderfully researched and he is so fun to listen to. But okay, I'll just leave this here.
He's one that should be, he's one that's got the history now.
That's okay, both of you. But Tom,
I've
do you
only been out
want
here 60 years.
That's impressive enough. Do you want to, if you want to sit back, use those pillows, I have a billion more of them, and, because it's pretty deep, most of these sofas, but here's one of them. Here, do you want one of these too?
No, that's fine.
Okay, because I need some of that for my body.
But you know what you started when you said this, because I went in one file, I couldn't come up with what I wanted, so then I went to the attic, and we've been going to clean our attic out now for 60 years.
Oh.
I have got such a mess in my dining room, you wouldn't believe. So we were starting to clean it up, and that's where I was coming, that's where I found it. The Highlanders were filed up there.
Now that is so cool that you kept them.
And I know there's more stuff up there.
Now that, I own,
That's an
that's,
adapter.
yeah. Oh,
There's a little slot in the top you put your SIM card in.
oh, see, I didn't know. that
This
was
fits
that.
in your computer.
I didn't realize that that was what they did.
This modern
I'm
technology.
gonna have to buy one of those, I think. But I think what Sam's gonna do, he's gonna take care of the after, but I would like to take a picture of that and get myself one for the future.
So
So,
Walmart $10 or something.
no, that's good.
Yeah, $10 for the SIM card and the adapter.
Oh, that's really handy. I'm gonna write that down. This SIM card, SIM?
It's the same as,
Oh, yeah, right, same as, okay. And adapter.
now the number may be different for your camera.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll check it out.
There aren't too many different SIM cards, so.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. This is a 16 GB. Okay, again, this is what you can use for the camera, but it's not what you have on the phone, right? Or it is what you have on your phone.
Well, the SIM card is in the phone.
But that is the
This
adapter
is
for the phone.
adapter,
For the phone.
right.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, because that's where I hope in the future, if I ever get enough space, phone adapter. Okay, that's good. All right, why don't we begin? I'm not sure how much we have from the preliminary, but I'm going to formalize this discussion we're going to have and begin by introducing you or having you introduce yourself and giving your address for the sake of the video recording. So I have here today with me
Tom and Lois Soderberg,
okay, and where do you live?
1822 Boland, which is on the southwest corner of Boland and Fairfield.
All right. And I wanted
And
it,
you have lived there since when?
I've lived there since the winter of 1940.
That's pretty impressive. I like that. We're going to talk about the neighborhood that you were born in, Highland Park, but we're also, if there's anything that pertains to the questions that are asked that triggers some memory of Ford Plant, then add that. I know that primarily we're going to focus on the neighborhood because that's what I know of you. I have no idea if you ever worked or had friends that worked at Ford Plant, but I just didn't want to exclude it because
We do. We have a very dear friend that worked for the plant for,
He retired from the Ford Plant.
yes.
and I think he started when he was in high school.
Wow.
His,
So I mean, if you want questions about working in the Ford plant, we can get you a hold of Bill too.
Okay, that might be, what's Bill's last name?
Bregman.
I'm sorry?
Bregman.
Brinkman?
Yeah, his brother used to live over on Powell.
Okay.
and Saunders, or no, but his brother was one of the foremen.
He was a what?
He was a foreman.
A foreman. Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't know.
Well, Larry was, not Bill.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear us well enough, do you think?
I can't tell until if I stop it and
Do you
start
want
again.
to stop and try now?
He talks soft. You gotta tell him.
I know. Why don't we have a pause? Are we on?
We are.
Okay. Let's begin our discussion on the legacy of Highland Park and the Ford plant. As a preliminary, I'd like to introduce you why don't I just introduce you?
Sure.
We have today Tom and Lois Soderberg, and they live at 1822 Boland Avenue, which is at the southwest corner of Boland and Fairview in St. Paul, Minnesota. We're going to ask a few questions about the early life in the neighborhood of Highland Park and the Ford plant. I want both Tom and Lois to feel that they can elaborate on any of the questions, and we don't have to stay right on it, move around as much as you wish as it comes to your mind. But I'm going to start with, being that we already shared some of the wonderful resources that you have loaned to me, and I am going to refer back to the Highland Villager articles, to the St. Leo's handout that was that commemorating a certain year of St. Leo's from its early, or just a historical piece tracing its
From the
history?
time it started.
Yes, and the map, the 1876 map of
69,
Highland-
I think it is.
and whatever the year, it was,
1867, sorry.
that's okay. The map of Highland area in the earliest of times, and the other resources, which are really a treasure trove. But now that we've shared a little bit, we can go back to that at the end too, because I want to get any other thoughts that come up. But the first question I threw out is, tell us about yourself. Why don't we start with each of you first, your family, your connection to Highland Park or Ford Plant. How, when, and why did your family of origin first come to the area of Highland Park? So, Tom, take any part of that, and Lois also.
Well, my dad originally moved the family to this address in the winter of 1940 to 41. And I believe I was 8 years old at the time. And the nearest parochial school was Nativity, and that's where I spent my grade school years.
All right. Why don't we stop there and get Lois a little bit here, and then I'll get back to you. Lois, what about you?
I've only been here for 60 years.
60 years.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. All right.
Because we were married down to St. Leo's.
Okay. And where did you come from?
Luck, Wisconsin.
Oh, good.
I'm an outsider.
That's okay. I like that. What about your father's work, your mom and dad? What were they?
My dad was an interior decorator,
Really?
and
In the Twin Cities?
mostly in the St. Paul area.
Uh-huh. All right. Great. What about, do you have any early memories or stories that depict Highland Park or the Ford plant? Any favorite childhood memories from the 8-year-old on?
Well, it was very, very wide open. There were very, very few houses here.
Yeah, reference what you had told me before about the Boland Avenue location of your home and who owned it originally.
The The house I was brought up in was an original Boland farmhouse. And the street is named after the original owner. It was Adam Boland.
Oh, so Adam was the name of the person that had that house, Adam Boland? Why did some of the streets where you live mention Emil? Is Emil the same as Adam? I don't know Emil.
Could be. They've been in the area for quite some time.
Uh-huh.
But the other big farm was over on Montreal.
Right.
Yeah.
I read that in the Villager yesterday for the first time.
Yes.
I did.
That was the first time I realized that the original home was on Montreal.
Okay. And there were two brothers.
One lived across the street.
Yeah.
Well, there was no building across the street, but there was a home
Okay.
on the north side of Montreal, which I believe was probably it,
Uh-huh. Okay.
which has since been demolished and replaced by two houses.
All right. Was that at Montreal and Fairview, or were they further
It's
down?
just about the peak of the hill before you start going down.
About Davern.
Oh, okay. Up higher. Yes.
No, not there.
Oh,
Howell.
Howell.
Oh,
Broad
I see what you
Street.
mean. Closer to Howell. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Fairly recently that was removed.
Okay.
It's,
Like in the last 5 to 10 years.
within the last 20 years.
Okay.
15 to 20 years.
All right. That's good to know. What about, again, back to the early memories? I detoured you. Something about anything that comes to mind about your first years living
My
in
first
your home?
years, walking a mile and a half to school. That was major. That
Sure.
took a little getting used to.
Were there neighbor children from right here that
No.
also?
There was nobody down there.
There was, when you lived in the house originally, how many homes were on the Boland Avenue heading toward Howell from Fairview? What,
The
roughly?
one on the corner.
The one you lived in or across
No,
the street?
Across the street, there was one. The four corners had houses on it.
Okay, on all sides of that intersection of Fairview and Boland?
The four corners. there.
Uh-huh.
But there was nothing east of them until you get to the top of the hill by Snelling.
Oh, wow, okay.
And there were only there was one other house on the north side of the street.
Wait,
And
where are
that's
you now?
where the
One house,
1, 2, 3 be there are two houses.
you're saying from Fairview
The,
going?
the corner house
Yes,
and the second house on the north side of the street were there. And then the third house would have been equal to 2 lots down. And then
yes. That could have been almost right next door.
Pretty close to
Yeah.
yeah.
Because there's only, I can almost count, we're either
Yeah.
6th or 7th. We'll have to determine this after the interview, which exactly was here. I knew that the Salitas next door, her father-in-law, Honey Salita's father-in-law, built that house. And she said there were hardly any other homes on the block, so I'm remembering that. I really love this. So when you were a child, were there any recollections about, other than you walked to school for a mile and a half each way, any recollections of, did you meet other kids on the way? Were there a lot of cars? Was it more quiet? I mean, what was it like? And what hour of the day were you walking back and forth?
Well, back during the war years, they'd advanced the clock. They had wartime. They had daylight savings time, and then they had wartime.
I never heard of
That
it.
put the 2 hours ahead of normal time.
I had not ever heard
So
of
it
it.
was dark in the wintertime going to school.
Like at what hour were you, in actual time, what time would it have been?
Be 2 hours ahead of normal time.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if it were like 8 o'clock in the morning, it was actually,
6 o'clock in the morning.
wow.
Yeah.
Because of the lights, is that the deal? They wanted the light of day instead of turning on
During
lights?
wartime, it gave them more daylight time for working time
Uh-huh,
to
yes,
build things for the war.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I learned from the Brian McMahon presentation, that the Ford plant had converted part of its operation to building tanks,
Quite a bit.
and that this was secret. However, the tanks always went on this,
Yeah, there's a track.
yes, the
There's a
track.
concrete track around the back. As kids, we used to go out and watch them test drive.
You did, and supposedly this was top secret and no one knew about it. And he laughingly said, but if they were so noisy, everyone in the neighborhood knew about them.
They really weren't that nice.
Were
It
they?
was not a tank. It was a 6-wheeled vehicle.
Okay.
It
Wow.
actually had 3 axles on it.
Oh, wow.
And there
That's-
were more troop carriers probably.
Oh, they were? Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
But-
it was a light armored troop carrier.
Wow, and see, that was one of the things that was news to me about what the Ford plant was doing. So we're saying before, or at the time, if we got, the United States was in the war in December of 1941, then was this shortly thereafter, or was it even somewhere
Probably by 43 or so.
Okay.
Building.
had converted into doing some of the building of the tanks or the transports? Here's another question. I'm departing and going back another way. When you had no playmates, what was the ethnicity, even though it was likely inhabited? Were you among only Catholic people because you went over to Nativity, or was
We
there
were Catholic or Jewish.
either Catholic or Jewish? There weren't any Protestants here.
No, we had a Mexican family.
Really?
Well, that goes way back.
Oh, that's okay, but that's interesting.
Yeah, there was a, I don't know if they were squatters. There was they made their home at, would be the corner of, was it
St. Paul Avenue.
St. Paul Avenue in Montreal
Yes,
on the northeast corner.
yes.
And I used to stop there and go fishing down at the river,
I love this
and
time.
I'd walk cross country. But they had a well down there, and I could stop and pump some water and get a drink at their place.
In the front of their house, you mean, or inside?
It was outside,
Yeah,
away
yeah.
from the house.
Yeah, wow.
And they had 2 donkeys there, as I recall.
This is really something.
The kids used to ride the donkeys over to the National Tea grocery store in the village.
Where, that was the grocery store that your mom and dad
Yeah,
used
in the
shopped?
village. It was
Yeah.
on Ford Parkway.
I didn't know that was National Tea was there.
Yeah.
That predated apple bombs, Hoves,
Oh, yeah.
Red
All
Owl.
the other
Anything
grocery
that was
stores
down
that
there.
follow. Right.
See, I didn't know. When this was when you were like your youngest years, that National Tea was one of, so Jewish or Catholic, what about, you mentioned how far away your school was. Did your children go to another school? Was
Our children went to.
Our 3 children went to Highland Catholic, well, St. Leo's.
Yeah,
St. Leo's.
that's what I figured they were.
They were down there when the merger happened between the 3 churches.
Is that
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Oh, okay. What do you kind of remember the year that coming together, the 3 parishes of St. Leo's? St.
Well, there's a
Grace?
file upstairs that
St.
says
Leo's.
Highland Catholic, it'll be in there.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I was just trying to
Well, I
remember.
think it's the article
The
about
school.
St. Teresa's in
We'll
there.
have something.
The
That's when,
school merged first.
Yes, that's right. It predated the church merger.
Predated the
That's right, by some years.
and
maybe
then St. Gregory came in after that.
Okay, I kind of remember that. Okay, well, that's good to point out. Okay, what about, I was wondering about, do you have any recollections of the pastors of either of the churches where you went to church or where your children went to school? Any outstanding personalities involved in those schools?
Father Murray was very personable. My father was not even a Catholic at the time.
Was
But so
very-
much of them, his donation to the parish was to do all the decorating, painting and decorating in the new rectory.
Wow, that is a great blessing and a gift to the church, wasn't it? How neat. How did your father come to know him? Just because of your...
He came, when he started the parish, he came around and visited the entire neighborhood.
This is Father Murray.
Father
And he was a
Murray.
father, not a Monsignor.
No, that came much later.
Yeah, that was much later.
Okay.
That was in my time.
But,
He went to the neighborhoods and he met your father,
yeah,
learned
he
what your
sat
father
down. I
did.
remember him sitting at the dining room table with us, talking about it. Was going to start a church here.
Wow.
Were we interested?
Wow. So do you remember the other families that first were original founders or families?
That'll
that-
be in the
Oh, in the
church
St. Leo's.
book.
Thank you. I will look that
Yeah,
over.
Yeah, that'll be all listed in there.
I remember the Runyons were part of that
Yeah.
early, because I had done a little history of St. Greg's. So maybe they weren't with St. Louis then, but I'm a little mixed up about how, if St. Greg's didn't even exist.
That wasn't there.
That
No,
wasn't
that's-
there.
That
It
was
was
built
later.
much later.
Thank you, that helps.
Yeah.
It was is it possible? It's 40 years. 1951 is when St. Greg started, I think. But
Yeah, because we were married, we were married in the 50s.
Yeah, where were you married? Here you
St.
said?
Leo's,
Okay.
in the school auditorium,
And so what year was your wedding?
58.
1958.
It'd be 60 years next year.
That's good. That's a good record. Okay. What about, oh yes, I was going to ask this, only if you felt at ease with it. It's awkward sometimes to share this kind of information, but the price of housing or the price of goods that you had to buy, was there anything about that, either the cost of living or the price of homes or the cost of groceries that you remember?
I believe my dad was able to purchase the house after the war. They rented the house during wartime.
Oh,
The
really?
family that owned it, I think, was in Chicago. And
So you were not the first to own it after the
Oh,
after the
no, no.
Bolands. There were previous owners. Okay.
Immediately after the war, he bought it 44, 45.
Okay.
somewhere there.
Okay.
And I think he paid $5,000 for it.
I like that. Those are good prices. That's really neat. What about Lois? We've got to get you into this. You were a live-in mom. I mean, not a live-in mom. A stay-at-home mom. Sorry about the
Yeah,
live-in
see,
mom.
we weren't married until 58, so
That's right.
he's got more,
Yes.
younger years with him than I know anything about.
Well, getting-
It's just the stories that have been coming out. you know.
Sure, but being a stay-at-home mom, what about where did the kids go? What entertainment was there? How did you get playmates for them, or what happened? Or they just,
They just hiked down to St. Leo's to school
and to the playground?
and the playground.
Yeah. So what did Hillcrest Park have at that time?
A good sliding hill. Oh, that goes back to your days for sliding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They
it
used to go
was-
all the way down to St. Paul Avenue.
Well, no, it was what's across the street down.
Cleveland?
Wilder?
Oh, yeah.
Kenneth.
Well,
Kenneth?
yeah, Kenneth, yeah,
Kenneth,
both of
across.
them.
Yeah. Okay.
So you slide down from the hilltop down.
Right.
That's cool.
And it used to be pretty hairy, as I recall. There were quite a few accidents in there.
Well, I bet. Well, that was the hangout where everyone from the city would come. Oh, I was supposed to disconnect that clock. We'll have to overlook that. I'm going to get to where you worked in 1 second here.
And he's got a few more year memory than I have. I've only got the stories that he's told me about.
I'm sorry. That kind of messed it up. But where were you working, Tom?
Where was I working?
I mean, when you actually, I don't know where you went to school after Nativity. I don't know when you began your work life.
From Nativity, I went to St. Agnes,
Oh, really? High school there. Okay.
which was
And so did your oldest sister.
Yeah, my older sister graduated from there too.
Well, how did you get there? You weren't walking there.
Relatively easy. I took the Highland bus, which was on Highland Parkway at that time,
Okay.
and that went over to Pryor University,
Mm-hmm.
which was also, if you just walked across University Avenue,
Uh-huh.
it was the end of the bus route.
Oh, that's
And
perfect.
it was the beginning of the streetcar route for Hamlin, Cherokee, the Hamlin, Cherokee.
Streetcar line.
And
Okay.
that took me right past school.
That was ideal. How long would that have taken you, that trip?
About 35 to 45 minutes.
Yeah. And how much did it cost to take the bus or streetcar? Was the streetcar you were catching?
10 cents.
10?
10
I like
cents.
that.
Or a token, which was slightly less. If you bought tokens, it was slightly less. than
So
10
was
cents.
that, you don't get a, what do you call it, like an all-day pass, or you couldn't, that was, so you're paying a dime each time or a token each time?
There were transfers. I could get a transfer.
That's what I mean, a
from the
transfer.
bus.
Yeah.
From
Oh, from the
to
bus
streetcar.
to the streetcar. I see what you mean. All right, that's neat. So were there a lot of children on that, being transported that same way? Or were you pretty much,
Most of the students were going to the U from this area.
oh.
That was in the 50s.
Okay. All right.
But, by the 50s, the neighborhood had also sprouted,
Yes.
houses just popped up everywhere.
Yes, exactly.
Well, the high schools are either St. Thomas or Green,
Yeah,
you know, because Highland wasn't here then.
No, I knew that. But
It was either Central.
But you had gone to St. Agnes, and then were you working after that, or did you go to college, or where did you go for college?
I
Or attend
didn't go to
classes?
college. I went to Votech.
Okay,
Well, your dad died after graduation.
My dad died
after your high school graduation.
not even a month after I graduated.
Oh, that's awful.
At the end of June, he passed away.
That's awful. Yeah. And the VOTEC, how did you decide what area you would study?
Well, that wasn't until we were married that you were at Votech.
Yeah,
Oh,
I went to Votech for quite a few years,
yeah.
taking evening courses down there. So,
You're very, I know, knowledgeable about how to use tools and what tools to use for what kind of jobs, and that you have an engineering capability. And I mean, I've seen things or heard things of what you've done when the Grabners lived across the street. Weren't you a helper when they were building that
my
roof?
son,
Or was it your son?
Steve
my son
was,
had,
yeah.
Oh, but didn't you get called in to be a consultant as
well, a
well?
few times. Yeah.
Oh, and there was a problem, Tom. I got a problem.
Oh, I know. It was a very complicated roof structure, as I recall, didn't it?
Oh.
Yes.
I don't know how he did it, but wow.
No, our son helped him on the addition on the house
I remember
with
now.
all the Mexican tile.
Okay. See, I didn't know what that history was. What about, do you feel that Highland Park was a good place to raise a family?
Oh, yes.
When the kids started growing up to school age, we started looking around town for something that would be convenient to schools and businesses, and it wasn't anything better.
Wow, that's
So
good.
we added on to the house.
Oh,
So the part you see facing Bowling
yes.
is what we added
You
on
added.
to that.
What was it about the community that made you feel this was better to stay, that you had more amenities or more something? What are you thinking of that felt it completed and satisfied you?
The kids were able
The schooling
to
mostly.
school.
Walking to school.
Schooling was everything for the kids.
And having a very fine educational facility and accessibility of it.
Yeah.
And what about, again, the transportation end of it was not too complicated? I mean, not just for the walking into school, but for y'all in the convenience of getting to grocery shopping or organizations or whatever else you wanted to get to.
No, I drove, so I mean, it was never any problem.
Yeah, that's good. What about, did you take, did you ever have a memory of Highland Fest? I don't know how long that was existing. Did you ever do
That's
that?
not that old.
Okay, it didn't go back as long. What about the subscription? I know that the Villager had commented about, they started in 1953. Were those papers distributed at the doors at that time? You know, the little Villager.
Yeah, it's always been as far as I recall.
So y'all had those. And did you take any other local newspapers?
Oh, the St. Paul Dispatch.
You always did have those.
His mother took that for,
There were two. Pioneer Press was in the morning, Dispatch was at night.
I
There's
kind
two
of
separate
remembered
papers.
that.
because when Steve delivered papers, you had to do the morning route and the evening route.
They're good for him. I
And he'd
can't.
sit out in the backyard until the paper would be thumped on the corner, and then he'd get up and deliver them.
Wow, that's great education to get them going with, and a good job, starting with job. You mentioned about the Ford plant friends, this Bill. And,
Bill Braylon, yeah.
And how did you know Bill? Who was he?
He's married to one of his high school classmates.
Oh.
He's married to a classmate.
A friend, just a longtime friend, and that's how you knew of him. And his brother, you remember that name?
Larry.
Larry.
And Dolores.
Okay, so we might talk later about that, or you might get that to me, or way to
Yeah.
reach them if I could.
Well, Larry is gone. He died several years ago.
Okay. What about other community activities? Were there any other things that were going on in Highland in the early years? Help refresh me. You were here from the time you were
The
8.
pool.
Oh yeah, the Highland Pool.
You lived at the pool
Oh, yeah.
How fine.
as a kid.
So that pool was the one that has
The golf carts in it.
Yes.
It's
No, or the
across
little
street.
Highland Pool is that smaller building.
The building is
That has
still there.
been closed and now it's about to
They
be
fill it up,
revamped for a art center or maybe some future purpose.
so.
Or it's a frisbee.
Yeah, they
there's
play
a
a
frisbee
center.
course on the
So
back there.
in the back right now, they have this little stone lift up or something. Was the pool at that location right behind the pool house then? Is that all that land behind was where the pool was?
Well, it was kind of probably slightly diagonal.
Yeah, that's what I figured, the way the structure is now. And then the new pool across the street was built. What, was there a time frame where
Well, it's
the little one that you would have been in lasted for a time and then they decided to make the bigger move
Boy,
across?
that you're gonna have to.
That's
I
okay,
don't
it was just-
know
Well,
how close. I
pictures.
think there was a time when there was no pool.
Okay. But it was a very
Well, our
popular.
kids took their swimming lessons at the high school, or, the Highland High School. When they were younger, they took their lessons at the high school.
All right, that's neat. So did you participate in any, did the original Highland Pool location sponsor any competitions, or was it just open swim and it was just
Open
the fun
swim.
thing? Yeah, that's really cool. I'm glad you mentioned the pool. What about the theater? Did y'all ever go to the theater after, for movies or anything? Were there Saturday shows?
Edith Bush Theater.
Oh, tell me about the Edith Bush Theater.
Oh, that
Who
was fun.
was Edith Bush? I don't know particulars about her.
Originally, it was owned by the wife of a Minnesota mining executive.
Yeah, 3M.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where
So,
the Edith Bush came in.
and so Edith Bush was an actress, or she was just married she wasn't the woman that's the wife of the 3M executive, was she?
I couldn't.
That's
I'm not
okay.
sure that.
I knew the name was
You'll
important.
have to punch that in for
It's-
history under
it's a
Edith
connection.
Bush.
Okay, I'll do that. But y'all used to go to those plays.
Oh,
Your
yes.
family
Well, they're
did.
great.
And then we used to have, if there was a special play coming up, then the Women's Guild would sponsor it over there. Then we have, wine and cheese after the play or
Wow.
at intermission.
Nice.
We did that for
Nice.
years.
Wow. How long do you remember that operating as a theater? Because I knew it went, well, roughly speaking. I mean, you took your kids there, so they were young when they went and you continued to go and
Yeah.
support it?
Probably early 60s it stopped.
Okay. That it closed.
Yeah, 'cause I don't think Linda and Mark were ever there. No, I think it was probably the early 60s.
That's neat. Oh, it's a beautiful building. I've never been inside it, but I just thought the
It
outside.
was just unique.
Yeah, I bet. I knew it was a treasure of the area. What about, was there anything happening in the political sphere that you remember that might have impacted you, either locally, something political, or, more widely? Either that impacted your living or your work? Nothing comes to mind? Elections of anybody?
I guess you can't say we're not very political.
Well, no,
minded.
like the mayor. Do you remember any mayors from the
Well,
Lake
Charlie
Island?
McCarthy.
That's one of the ones I had in mind.
Yeah.
But
He was quite the guy.
he was unusual.
And Latimer.
Oh, yeah. What do you remember about George Latimer as a mayor of St. Paul? Just any little thing. Was there any particular?
Very first class.
He was, as a gentleman
As a
and
gentleman.
capable. What is it that you miss most about the good old days? What made you the happiest or the most grateful for being in Highland Park or involved in the Flirt Plan?
Oh, not much really. Our family being all blue collar types, and most of the people were moving in at that time are not, still aren't.
So that was the hard part, or that was the good part? You liked the diversity of having other people that might not have been involved the same way that you were in the community, or you preferred?
Well, I was at Nativity, excuse me,
That's okay.
at Nativity, was pretty much upper middle class,
Oh, it was. Uh-huh.
and still is.
Okay.
And
Yes.
I was a little bit, I was an outsider definitely, because the nearest student that was close that I used to walk with
Yes.
was Bob Walsh, who lived on Beard.
That's a long way from here.
Now, his dad was the owner of Seven Corner Hardware Store.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they lived down Mississippi River Boulevard. And his girls and his son went down to Highland Catholic too.
What was his name again? The owner of the Walsh, W-A-L-S-H.
Yeah.
I never knew who owned it. That was such a wonderful, fun story.
Well, Bob ended up being the owner, and
Huh.
he just sold off recently.
Wow. Well, when they closed it for the reconstruction, or for that hotel,
So he's retired.
it manages. But he was the classmate, or it was, no. Was he who did you walk with from Bayard? Was that his family?
That was Bob Walsh.
It was the very man who became the owner. Or was he a son of?
He's his son.
Okay, the son of the owner. Huh. That's fun. What about, how did you get around most of the time? When did you first own your own car?
Well, I didn't get my first bicycle until I was about in the almost the 8th grade,
Okay,
because couldn't get it during the war.
okay, good point.
And my first bicycle came from Mr. Monahan. Do you remember Monahan?
I vaguely remember the Monahans. There were two Monahans that lived on this block. I don't know if you know that.
This is the one that lived just like
The
two
original,
houses down there.
the original Mr. Monahan.
Yeah.
Now, was he an attorney, or what? Do you remember his background?
Yes, he
He
was
was?
an attorney.
Because the second family Monahan, I'm not joking about this, the same house had another Monahan family. Not long. They didn't live anywhere as long as the original Monahans. That is such a coincidence.
Well, Monahan was such a character.
Okay, tell me about him. I remember his wife because he predeceased her, I believe.
Well, he was also a customer of mine, because my first major job was, after I got out of high school, was working at the gas station in Fort Snelling.
In Fort Snelling.
Yeah, it's great.
Knew there was one in it.
Across from the polo fields.
It's on
Really?
just north of the polo field.
But it's not there now, is it?
I think the building might still be there.
Is that right?
He started working there when he was working there when we got married.
Wow.
My dad was a customer of Rube Zamansky, who had the Standard Oil Station at Randolph and Snelling.
Okay. Is that, the Zamansky name's familiar to
Well,
me,
he lived on Montreal. He built a house on Montreal.
because it could have been, one of our sons went to school with a Stephen Zamansky, and I'm trying to remember what his father's name is. It wouldn't have been Reuben, but maybe this man, Reuben, was the father of the man.
Anyway,
Yeah,
when
go back to that.
my dad was still alive, and he kept telling Rube what a mechanical son he had.
Just because you had to take everything apart and put it back together, and he still does.
That's okay, I like it.
And a fellow that worked with Rube for years got a chance to manage that place out there, and he was looking for help.
The Fort Snelling
The
location.
Fort Snelling location.
It was a standard as well? A standard,
It
yes.
was at that time.
Yes. And that's how you got hired.
Yeah,
How fantastic. How old were you?
right out of high school.
So,
18.
18 years old.
Yeah.
And
Well, you also worked for Roy Madsen in between on
Well, that
motorcycles.
was real quick. Yeah, that didn't last too long. But
you knew how
this
to
was,
repair.
this was a better deal.
You knew how to repair motorcycles as well.
Not really.
Oh, okay.
You learned.
Yeah, that's
That
good.
was one of my first motorcycles.
Wow. Very cool.
I had a transmission problem with the motorcycle. And I went in on a Saturday morning. I just bought the machine from them a few weeks previous to that, so it was kind of under warranty yet. It was used, but it was still
Covered.
Lizzie,
covered.
wasn't it?
Hmm?
Didn't you call it Lizzie?
No, I don't know if I had a name. My original one it had a name.
That's neat.
Well, he's had motorcycles for
Wow. I like
70 years.
That's good. So the car, you already described earlier, both using the bus, the streetcar, getting the bike. But how did Mr. Monahan help you get a bike? I didn't, because you're saying recommending you for the job?
His son was in the military at the time during the war.
All
It
right.
was his son's bike, and had been sitting in the garage.
His daughter used to call him the sheriff.
And Dad was doing work on this house down there inside of there,
Uh-huh.
and questioned the bike. And he said, "Well, I can take the bike." So he took the bike. So I
How-
ended up with a bike.
How wonderful. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I used to bowl with Mrs. Monahan.
Now, tell me about the bowling alley. That's come up a couple of times in the Villager magazine. Lucky Lanes, is that where it was you Bold or not? Do you remember?
No,
That's not the same?
It was underneath the National Tea, the grocery store, which became the Red Owl, I think, afterward.
And so let's describe where exactly this location. We're talking about the shopping strip where we are currently completely filled in. It's on the south end of Ford Parkway from, is that Kenneth?
when I bowled, we used to bowl
to Cleveland?
like where the parking ramp is now.
Parking ramp.
Well, you were, what's
Which
Oh,
is-
yes. What about Lifetime Fitnesses, you mean?
Yeah,
And down that street
Edmondson's.
further west? What? Edmondson's? I don't know.
No, she,
Hymanson's.
I don't know this place.
no,
is
no,
that?
it wasn't.
Butch had it, dear.
It wasn't Butch. It was
There was a Pudge's. Is this part of the?
Pudge's.
But well, what was that? I never understood. Tell me what you know, because I think there was a
He
bowling.
used to babysit Pudge.
Now, who was Pudge? I just knew that.
Hymanson's.
I don't know them.
Pudge was a Hymanson.
How do you spell H-Y? Okay.
Lived on the corner of Highland Parkway and I think it went straight through from the stop and go like the, it's Kenneth,
Yeah.
would be the southwest corner.
Uh-huh.
Her house is featured in Better Homes and Gardens.
Yeah, she had a fantastic car. She was a drop-dead gorgeous woman.
This is Mrs. Hymanson.
Yeah.
And so what was her husband's name?
Her husband's name was...
Or what was her name?
I don't know, we just knew him as Jaime.
Okay.
Anne.
Her name was Ann Hymanson.
Okay. Now, what was the father's business? Was he tied in with that haberdashery?
No,
No,
he...
scrap iron.
She was a sister. You know, who was the
Rose
Irish
house.
couple? Roe.
Yes,
Rose house.
yes.
That house.
Originally.
That was originally.
Her
It
sister.
was Anne's sister.
I should have known these people. Meehan? Were the Meehans there? No, not that house. Because we did have.
No, the one.
I'm trying. Don't worry about it. We'll come upon that. I should.
We'll walk down the street and I'll say this one that I remember. You know who was in.
Edinger. Edinger
Really?
was the name of
The-
owner there.
Okay. Eddie.
And they ended up behind you over here. They built a house over.
Yeah. Is it the large house that's on Hillcrest? Eddie.
It was.
Are we spelling it Ettinger? Eddie.
Yeah.
Because they are, they owned, if it's the same family, that they owned a daycare center. Is that familiar or not?
No, that doesn't matter.
Later, but it may not be them. I can't come up with their names either.
One of the boys, Michael, that grew up there, ended up in the trucking business, and he had Edinger Trucking.
Oh, then I don't know them. Okay. Okay.
Grandfather, or the father of the two girls, Hymanson gal, this gal,
Yeah.
was Schnitzer Ironworks.
I don't know anything about that.
It was,
Minneapolis.
Okay.
it's right on the borderline of St. Paul, Minneapolis.
Okay, on the river area? Or no, by the highway?
No, Midway,
Okay.
north of the university,
All right.
between
Yes,
St. Paul and Minneapolis.
that one.
Huge scrapyard, and he made his fortune during the Second World War selling scrap.
Okay.
He originally had a wagon and went up and down the alleys
Yes.
with a horse and wagon.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
What's the name?
Schnitzer Ironworks. And Grandma and Grandpa lived up on Highland Parkway, close to Snelling.
Huh. No, I didn't know. I didn't know that, any of that. That's cool. So, but where we got into this name, trying to remember, it was Ann's sister that was a Edinger,
Edinger.
married into the Edinger family.
Yeah.
And so her husband was an Edinger. And then, so she lived in one of these houses just a little bit east of where I am right here.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll have to think back in the row house.
Rose lived there.
Bernie
They were from
and
Highland, yeah.
Yeah. Those two I did know. They were fun people. Okay. What would you say are the biggest changes that you recall happening over the years to Highland Park neighborhood or at the Ford plant? What do you remember in your 80 years of being here or whatever it might be.
The trucks on
That's
Ford Parkway hauling cars
Yes.
Oh,
with the old trucks.
that's a good point.
Okay, it was noisy.
That goes back as far as you were there.
No, I was here not in this house until 1973.
You missed that then.
Yes.
But all night long, the truck transports would come up Ford Parkway Hill.
Yes.
And those old Ford trucks only had like 100 horsepower motors in them. And they had Ford cars and the trailer on the back. And coming up that hill, they'd be in low gear all the way. And
Screaming.
the motors would just be screaming all the way up to Snelling. You could hear them.
Oh my.
Between them and the airplanes.
Yes. Oh, good point for bringing that up.
Oh,
yeah.
I do remember
Oh, yes.
this airplane noise because
When Mark and our two youngest when they're little, it's the planes that go over, they grab their ears and then lay down on the ground. Every time a plane came over, he'd be on the telephone, just a minute, wait till the plane goes over.
yeah,
Oh.
we were overwhelmed by that sound.
It was even worse though, during the war when they were,
During war years,
all the big transports.
well, not the transport, but the training planes would come over all propeller type.
Uh-huh.
And the guys would be revving their motors up coming down, you know.
Were they landing in the, was the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport not even in existence? It was more like the military part of Fort Snelling? I mean, is that where the landing was? Do you know?
It had nothing to do with the military. It was...
I thought it was during the war and they were transporting, or I thought you said during the war there was more plane activity.
Well, they did, yeah. They trained all pilots out there in these training planes.
Okay, that's what you meant.
Well, they would come over one right after the other. You know, there'd be maybe 20 of them up there at a time. And,
I see.
Compassing it.
But again, were they landing in what we would say in the area of what we have today as Minneapolis-St. Paul?
Old Chamberlain.
It's still one of the longest runways.
Okay.
That's why until just recently, planes that were going long distance, like overseas from here,
Yeah.
would take off on this runway, coming this way.
That was the one that we used to hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
We used to call it the Oriental Express because it was the same time every
A
day.
little bit after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, one of these big jobs would come over and they'd be fully loaded and under full power coming up, and they were really loud.
Yes, I remember how.
And then they finally started diverting them slightly. They would turn at about Cleveland.
They'd
Avenue,
follow the river
and
a little bit.
They'd follow the river a little bit as they were gaining altitude.
When you say fully loaded, you mean full of fuel?
Yep.
People and fuel.
And, yeah.
So they had to take off. They needed the longest
The
runway.
long one, yeah.
That was it.
So do you know what model of plane those might be? I'm not very educated about it, but just,
Page 747s.
Oh,
That's what
they were-
the big ones. Yeah.
oh,
This is pretty recent.
oh, well, I thought the runway that we were always hearing the sound from had been changed somehow, because we don't get the same noise that we used to on the regular basis. that
Well,
we
the
used to.
runway used to go this way, then they went north and south because now they cross the highway.
Yeah, they put 2 runways that are parallel with each other going much
Okay.
north and south.
Otherwise, the main one used to run right over our garage.
Yes. Well, it seemed to go over our house as well. Bounce off of our house and get over your
Dead
property.
center is our garage.
Yeah. it was-
That's the dead center. That's what they all aim for was our garage.
Yeah, there's fairly recent maps that show that line up for that runway is
Yeah.
right over our garage.
Wow.
At night, when they came in with the lights on, we'd come right in our bedroom window.
Oh my gosh. That was, I felt frightened by it because they were so
Our
low.
kids got so used to airplanes, they didn't know what it was like when it got to be quiet.
Yes.
Sometime during the middle of the night, they would come in a little extra low and you kind of wake up and say, oh boy,
Yeah, no kidding. Isn't that the
keep them
truth?
up there, you know.
Well, now talking about that, in the Highland Villager, I did read about a plane crash in a house. Did you ever know about, were y'all aware of that?
Yeah, it was right at the end of the airport, actually.
Was it?
No, there was one up here because you and your mother out to the baseball game, and I was in the living room when all the emergency squads went and was up by Highland Golf Course.
Well, someone told me Bayard. The Villager article talked about Bayard, and that was a 1,300, but that sounded like a long way. But maybe 1,300 is
It was-
about right.
Yeah, because we always figured
Be the other side of snow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
would be less than 16, so maybe
we
that-
always figure Lexington is 12, is 1,000, as
Okay.
far as numbers
Yes,
go.
yes. No, that fits in by the golf course. And if it was
I'm
like
aware of that.
so
Well,
you
you were at the ball game with your mother. out of the old Met Stadium.
But you had another, was there another plane accident or something?
There was one.
At the edge of the field?
Smaller homes that was really close to the airport.
Oh, really? Yeah, I didn't know that. What about the fire, with the Highland Fire, the Highland Shopping Center? There were two of them, but you didn't live here until, what year did you
I
say?
remember the big one.
Yeah, 1951, I think, is what it was. Although there was one in the 40s that destroyed the shopping center as it was, according to the records. Were you around at that time? Early 40s,
Oh yeah.
you said? But maybe you're too young to
We
recall.
woke up early in the morning because the pipes were knocking in the house.
Water
Because
pipes.
there were so many engines pumping water down there, it was sucking the water out of the pipes.
Oh my,
And so it was bang, 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 bang. Now we couldn't figure out what was going on.
of course.
And we hadn't heard the engines going down during the night.
And this was the one, what year were you thinking? Was this the 1951 time you're
I
thinking?
can't put a year on it.
No, but,
Sorry.
no, but you were
that's the one
still,
that destroyed the whole
yes.
thing.
I think it happened twice where it was destroyed. Whatever existed in the 40s was wiped out and then rebuilt, and then in 51. If this fire you're referencing now about the water power being used, seems to me that they said in the report that it might have been underneath the grocery store. I'm not sure. There was a Cut-Right grocery store. I could be wrong. There were two different fires that were referenced with two different starting points.
You'll have to go back and find that
Yeah,
one
yeah.
again.
No, but it's just,
Yeah.
it was devastating.
Mhm.
It was shocking, and the people were standing close just watching, and the fire trucks, and the damage was really crazy. What else? What would you say were the biggest changes that were happening in the world, even today, since you were a kid, either of you? What things have changed for the better or for the worse? I know these are big picture questions.
Electronics.
Oh, that's a good point.
To me, that's the biggest mystery.
Yes, I understand. And the existence of them. The cell phones weren't even around.
And they keep changing them, so you never know what's going on.
That's right. Right.
Our kids couldn't live without their electronics.
Yeah, and they changed so rapidly.
That's right. Do you find that a plus or a minus?
I guess it depends on what you want to do with it.
Yeah, right.
I'm too old to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, having just cleaned out volumes of letters, cards,
This is what we've been doing ever since we talked to you.
Wow.
I mean, you don't have that anymore.
You know what? That's such an insight. It's absolutely true that there are those who love writing and those who like to have those documents to refer to that were written for writing books, and they have the journals and the diaries and everybody's personal letters and correspondences. The fact that people aren't corresponding by letter, often they use email or the more current versions, has just pretty much eliminated a lot of the resource material.
Even the telephone, really.
What about the phone?
I mean, good grief nowadays, but you don't, if you're not on the internet or
Seen or think of, or
Well, we've gone through, we went from 78s to 45s to 33
all his music.
yes. So music is an interest. I didn't talk about
to
music.
tapes. And
Oh, several years ago we had a flood from one of the big storms, and we have about 400 albums in the basement. And they weren't raised up at the time. Now everything downstairs is raised up.
So you could save them.
and
And
it's-
we managed to save them all. But,
Yeah. Wow. That's
so it's music with him.
yeah.
So,
So did you play a musical instrument? But you loved music. Yeah.
Big band music, jazz.
Good music.
Well, did y'all dance?
Oh, good grief, yes.
Oh my gosh, this is a hidden piece of your life. Tell me about that. Where did you go?
Prom,
Yes.
Yeah.
That was on University, right?
yep. Porcelain Employees Club.
They had, how did you get there? Were you working for
Because I worked on books.
Oh, of course. How convenient. And so what was happening there? What kind of dancing? Or how did they arrange those evenings? Or
They just have, they're dancing on such and such a night, Saturday night or Friday night or something.
and everyone would just come?
Just show up.
And so that they had live musicians performing?
Most of the time it was live, especially if the prom was always
A
live.
couple of more customers, yeah.
To fill the ones?
When I worked out there,
Oh, sure.
it's about some of them were lonely customers.
Yeah, how neat is that? Wow.
You guys see this, I'm kidding about this Bill Bringman.
Yes.
This group that he went to high school with, we've been having New Year's Eve together now for over 50 years.
Oh, I like that. That's wonderful. So what did you do for those New Year's celebrations?
Usually dinner at somebody's house.
So
know.
you rotated the homes?
Yeah,
We still do.
still do.
Oh, you're kidding. Is it like a potluck, or does the hostess and host have to do the whole bit?
It's changed over the years, and it's gone from an evening thing to a daytime thing.
That's all right.
Because nobody wants to drive at night.
Sure. Right. No, that's very practical.
And there's been 5 couples that have been doing this all these years.
For over how many years?
Shortly after.
Well, it's over 50 years I
Yeah,
think
it's
we've been
over
New Year's
50.
Eves together.
That's really pretty.
And we've only lost 1 couple, and they just died in the last 5 years.
That's really, really remarkable. Wow, I love it. Are there any things that we didn't tap into? Because I'm feeling nervous now that we forgot to talk about music or any other skills. Were you
It's
like
gonna keep coming.
roller skaters or big time? What was
I
your?
was.
She was roller skating.
You're kidding, Lois.
Yeah,
Where did you do that?
on the university in Lexington.
What was there?
Roller rink. Indoor roller rink.
Okay.
You know, there was an old ballpark there.
No, I don't know about
It used to
that.
be the old Saints Stadium.
St. Paul Saints Stadium used to be on.
Oh, sure. Is that what you're referencing?
Well, the Coliseum, that's what they call it, wasn't it? It was a skating rink,
Okay.
and it was.
You did roller skate,
Basically,
I
it
did.
was the left field fence for the ballpark. If they hit a home run, it would go up on the roof of the Coliseum.
Now, this predated, did y'all know Fred Wagner? Fred and Nora?
Nora I did from the Women's Guild down at church.
Yeah, only mentioned because for where the St. Paul Saints played, that stadium, Fred Wagner's business was Minnesota Wire and Cable. And that was right at the back fence, was right, not of the field, but of the parking lot was his building. Now, maybe he wasn't there when you're, talking about, I can't picture that roller rink. You said Lexington University.
Yeah, that's when I first came down here to work, which was 53.
You came down to work, you
in the
said,
city, yeah.
from Luck. What were you doing when?
St. Paul Fire and Marine Insurance Company, now St. Paul Companies.
Yeah.
Now Travelers, I guess.
What did you do for them?
Oh,
This is your time now, Lois. We heard from Tom.
well,
How old were you, number one? What year?
18.
You were 18.
And
so-
that's
Yes.
when we used to do the roller skating.
Okay. But you were doing some kind of work for the.
He's a bookkeeper.
Okay, you were bookkeeping for the St. Paul
Yeah.
Fire and Marine. And how did you find that job? How did you get to the job, and where did you live if you were an 18-year-old young woman?
506 Portland Avenue.
How did you find that?
Because my cousin's girlfriend was already working there.
And how did you simply learn from your friend about an opening and then applied? And so you knew you had a place to live. How did you get from the Portland location to the downtown? Was there a bus there?
Usually hiked. Either that or it was Selby Avenue bus.
But you said you hiked there? You did?
We used to hike to work from
That's a long
It's
way,
downhill
isn't it?
already.
just the cathedral and down the Cathedral Hill.
But you had to walk back up.
That was always the chore.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we had the Selby Avenue bus.
But how long would it be if you did the walking? What would be your time of having to walk?
About 20 minutes.
That's great, though.
That was the good old days.
Yes, exactly. So how did the two of you meet?
That's where we met.
Oh, how did you get over to St. Paul Fire and Marine or to the Portland?
At 506 Portland. Because the people that owned it, the first top 2 floors were all girls that lived there.
Uh-huh.
There were 14 to 16 girls there at the time.
Were y'all in one dormitory or was it lots
Second
of?
ones.
They had 14 bedrooms?
No, there'd be like 2 to a bedroom.
Okay, all
It was
right.
the 3rd floor and the 2nd floor.
Oh, okay.
Those were big houses.
Had to be. And so how did Tom just kind of float into the scene here?
You know, one of his best friends was picking up his girlfriend, and that's how I met him.
Okay, so you were like hanging around.
I was, you were filling, I think, for some,
Oh, you were at a
Yeah,
blind date,
was
more or less.
Very blind, I'd never met him before. And we're short somebody, come on down. I said, well, let me change clothes. I can remember that because I lived on the 3rd floor.
Oh, I
And
love
the
it.
party was in the party room in the basement.
That's cute.
There's only 1 minute left of battery.
Are we done?
There's 1 minute left of
Oh,
battery.
1 minute. So we're going to wrap it up technically. Thank you, Sam. I really appreciate everything that you've said.
Oh, there's so much more to fill
I know
in.
there is, but we're going to, for the formality of closing this off, we'll just say thank you for your part in this shared history of Highland Park and Ford Plant. And maybe we'll be able to tap into your expertise.
Well, the early history is really him.
I can tell, but that's okay. Yours is not too shabby.
I've only been there 60 years.
That's good, though. Well, we're going to say goodbye and thank you, Sam. Good job. And I wanted to recognize that we still got tape time. Sam Masio, our videographer for the day. But y'all are just,
Winter Carnival.
really.
Then we traveled all the small towns.
And so how did you,
The Schmidt Indian Drum Corps.
so you don't know anything about this?
Schmidt
Minnesota mining.
Minnesota Mining.
This is hilarious. I mean, just the fact that that is a thing of the past.
Don't you ever go to the Carnival Parades?
I have been, but not frequently. You know, the older.
They used to take about 3 hours to do the parades.
Oh, I used to love it. You took 3 hours to get, that was large? What? Your whole drum corps didn't take that long. Was it that big?
The parades would, because
Yeah, the whole
they
parade.
start at the Capitol and then come down through downtown St. Paul.
Okay, but not 3 hours of just your drum
No.
corps. You had a smaller. How many people would be members of that?
Oh, 50, 60.
That's still plenty.